And welcome back to the TR News Show with us on C today. The upcoming ASEAN Summit, Indonesia Chamber of Commerce, has a mission to promote regional economic integration and collaboration between ASEAN member states.
Yes, and to get to know more about this important matter, we have here with us our special guest in the studio, Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Chairman Arsjad Rasjid. Welcome, Arsjad.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here.
You have just landed from Myanmar and you're here right now. It's so amazing.
I just came back I just came back actually.
Right, so before we go further with the talk about ASEAN Summit, we know that this is important matter we have here with you, and we would like to open the question with the question of the general question: why does ASEAN matter?
Well, it's a very good question, right? And so this year, right, the theme of ASEAN is ASEAN Matters, the epicentrum of growth.
Yeah.
So ASEAN really do matters. Do matters why? Because of the epicentrum of growth. So we do believe that the epicentrum of growth globally is actually in Asia. When we talk about Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. And we talk about Southeast Asia, we talk about ASEAN.
Yes.
Yeah, you can see that, for example, even in 2019, the ASEAN so-called economy is about $3 trillion US, right? And in the next, say by 2030, it's estimated it's going to grow very fast, that we are, as ASEAN, we number 5, 6 globally, right? And so this shows that it really do matters, that ASEAN matters. And if you look at the overall economic growth in ASEAN, for example, right? Indonesia is above 5, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the Philippines is more than 6%, I think. And Vietnam, I do believe, is like 8%. So if you take an overall average in ASEAN, it's around 5%, right? And how ASEAN also is able to actually manage the inflation, as an example. That's another showcase. So, and then more than that, what you have to see is that in ASEAN, altogether, the population is almost 700 million people, right? Just imagine, and the demography is also similar to every country like Indonesia, mostly are young, right? So this is a promising. So what you can see is a big market, right? It has all the ingredients of growth, and we are not only that we have this 280 million people, but in ASEAN also we have a lot of what we call the natural resources. Right? We have minerals, right? And minerals, some of the minerals are very key important. For example, on what? On electric vehicles, as one example, right? So actually minerals of the future is in ASEAN too. So I do believe, ASEAN is the next China.
ASEAN in the whole, in the whole, right?
Cumulatively, I love it because you just mentioned we have all the potential for growth.
Yeah.
And now we always see these ASEAN summits, ASEAN as policy making, right? We always see it from the very top. But the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been appointed as the ASEAN, Business Advisory Committee chair this year, Indonesia.
That's right.
So can you tell us, if we're talking ASEAN about policymakers, what does a Business Advisory Council do? And with this Advisory Council, how do you bring businesses to collaborate across nations? And is it just for ASEAN, or do you, as the BAC this year, also create trade agreements or perhaps collaborations with other countries or unions, if you may, outside of ASEAN?
Now, first of all, understanding what is ASEAN BAC, they call it, right? Is ASEAN Business Advisory Council, right? So this ASEAN Business Advisory Council actually was enacted, right? Was the initiative of the ASEAN governments, right? That it needs to have the voice of the business, right? So a long time ago, right, they created this so-called the ASEAN Business Advisory Councils. And the councils consist of 3 people or 3 businesses appointed by the government of each of the government. And in these 3 persons appointed from every nation. So now we have 10 ASEAN nations. So 10 times 3. So we have 30 business council members within this, right? And particularly for this year, right, as Indonesia is taking the chairmanship, right? Pak Joko Widodo, our president, is the chair of ASEAN this year, right? Ketua of ASEAN. So, so in the business, also Indonesia take the chairmanship right? So now we have this. So now when we take this as the chair of ASEAN, we look at and we talk with the government and say, I think it's time for us to have this alignment, you know. In Indonesia, we have the alignment, what we call Indonesia Incorporated, where we want the public and the private sectors to be in one,
Yeah.
the government and the private sectors, right? To do really engaging together. So we say, why don't we take this to the ASEAN level? Okay, let's create this ASEAN Incorporated, right? Where the government and the business are moving together. So since the inception of ASEAN, it's always been led by the government-led, right? Which is good, right? But I think we do believe it is time for the business to actually be a co-lead there, okay? Co-leading this ASEAN, and particularly when we talk about, you know, we have what we call the ASEAN Economic Community, AC.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, at the end of the day, the government can sign any agreements, right? But those agreements will be implemented by the private sectors.
That's right.
Right? So at the end of the day, it is better to just have that alignment since the beginning, right? And it's also pragmatically is this, right? Goes to what the theme of ASEAN Business Advisory Council for this year. So the ASEAN matters, epicenter of growth. That's what ASEAN motto is. And we take the epicenter of growth and say, okay, this is the time for ASEAN businesses to create the centrality. So we said ASEAN centrality, right? Innovating for a greater inclusivity. The three keywords, ASEAN centrality, innovation, and inclusivity.
With the purpose, yeah, inclusivity is like another level, Pak.
It is another, because it's this, right? We have to make sure that everybody is not left behind.
Yeah.
We have to make sure of that. That's inclusivity. Because, and we talk about innovation, we say, okay, how do we create the centrality to make sure inclusivity is there? We have to think out of the box. We have to be innovative.
It's true.
So those are why, and so this is a bit different from the previous ASEAN chairmanship, where we do believe that it is time for a people-to-people approach or business-to-business approach in ASEAN.
Yes. I still love the keyword that you've mentioned. ASEAN right now has all the ingredients for growth.
Yeah.
Pak. And you've been just from Myanmar, and we've heard from the news you went to Vietnam at the first time also talking about this. So maybe talking about the evidence first. How is the progress so far, Pak? And then next question is, what will be the priorities for BAC ASEAN during the Indonesian presidency?
Okay, first of all, so we've been going to a roadshow, and it's also for the first time actually, an ASEAN BAC contingent is going a roadshow and visiting every nation in ASEAN, right? Why? The question is why. The most important is this. The question of what do we want as ASEAN? What do the people want? What do the business want from ASEAN? Do you need ASEAN? Do you want to be part of ASEAN? In a way, right?
Right. You collect that.
Yeah. So this is where we're going, right? So we've met with every, we want to be inclusive. So we meet with every local chambers, like the Kadin of Singapore, of Malaysia, of the Philippines, of Vietnam, everyone, right?
Or even Myanmar, yeah?
Even Myanmar, right? And then we, not only that, we meet with the top leaders there. And in most of the ASEAN countries, we met with the stakeholders. It's the governments, the ministers, the secretaries, right? And so what we brought, and we say, okay, we have defined during Indonesian chairmanship 5 priorities.
Okay.
5 priorities.
5 priorities. First priority we say is sustainable development. Okay. Number 2 is about digital transformation. Number 3 that we brought in for this conversation is health resilience.
Yes.
Actually, these 3 are a similar conversation that actually we introduced during G20.
G20.
Yes, G20.
Right? But, you know, at that point of time, we talk about energy transition. Here, we talk more about sustainable development, so a bigger picture, right? And then health resilience, the same, right? And the third one is this digital transformation that we actually had during that conversation. Then we have 2 more, which is very relevant to today's situation. Food security.
Food security.
You know, we all know, what's happening in the world, in the geopolitical situation, high food prices and scarcity of food. So we need to work on this food resilience. And then 5th is to really what we call trade and investment facilitation. Okay? And this trade and investment facilitation, we want to push this what? We want to have more investment intra-ASEAN. That means what?
Between the countries of ASEAN.
Yes, we want to make sure that, oh no, companies in ASEAN should invest more in ASEAN. Let's create an ecosystem of business. Let's strengthen our so-called ASEAN domestic market,
Right.
right? And to make sure we are the players
Yeah.
in ASEAN. So that's the 5 priorities that actually we push in. And of course, we also have the legacies, of these projects, So for each of this project, if you don't mind, I explain to you.
Of course, please do.
Sure, we
Yeah.
need to know about that. This is part of the
so-
progress, right?
So first, on the digital transformation, right? We have 3 legacies projects
Yeah.
that we brought, right? Number 1, we call it ASEAN QR code. This is for
Yeah.
a payment of QR. So, we can use our phone anywhere. Tuk, 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 tuk,
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Between the
Between
countries
us.
of ASEAN.
And what's the benefit of this also? We are using local currency.
That's right.
Yes.
That is happening within Indonesia and Thailand,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And then, same thing, we don't have to use so-called international clearances anymore.
Right.
We can just do intra-ASEAN.
Yeah.
With that, we can actually reduce almost up to 200 basis points, right? 2%. That's big, that's huge. Because this is particularly important for micro, small, medium enterprises. And that's the focus. Because why? The foundation of the economy in ASEAN, similar to Indonesia, the contribution of the micro, small, medium enterprises to the economy is key importance. So we need to strengthen this micro, small, medium enterprises, right? And this actually answers that. But that also answers what? What the theme of ASEAN centrality, right? So this so-called QR code within ASEAN
Yeah.
would create what we call the centrality. We do transaction within us, centrality of ASEAN, right?
So how many countries are ready?
Today, for example, Indonesia and Thailand.
Yeah.
Thailand,
okay?
yeah.
Vietnam and Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia. So we are talking about at least 4 or 5 countries. But surprisingly, even Myanmar as an example, right? I just came back, and Cambodia as an
Yep.
example also. When I was at Cambodia, the deputy governor of the central bank said, we want to do it. Let's do it. We want to do it. Let's do it. In Vietnam, the same thing. The deputy governor of the central bank said, yes, we want to do it. When I just came back from Myanmar, I was amazed, how the chambers of Myanmar, the Chamber of Commerce there, with all the companies, are preparing for this digital transformation and say, sir, we want to be part of this. We want to be, and we are finalizing our, standardization of QR code this year. He says,
Yep.
after that we can join in. I say, please do, anytime. So we connect also the clearings, the payment gateway from, say, Myanmar or any other, with the players in ASEAN, in Indonesia, in Singapore, in Malaysia, all this. So that is connected. And it's also very aligned actually with what the government is trying to do. The central bank of Indonesia
Yeah.
and also our finance minister during their meetings in Bali, they were talking about this too, right? They want to
Yep.
push this. So this is wonderful. The public sectors and the private sectors are coming together and saying this is it, for example, right? And so, of course, other legacies that is there on digital formation is the marketplace for digital lending. We have Wiki Entrepreneurship, it's a platform to connect small, medium enterprises. And then we have on sustainable development, we introduced 2 legacies project. One is what we call the Net Zero Hub. We started in Indonesia. We call the Kadin Net Zero Hub. Now we want to bring the conversation to ASEAN so that all the companies, we can share together how to do this journey towards net zero, right? Indonesia already committing to 2060.
Yep.
We want to share with all the other ASEAN nations, right? So that all the companies there can share technology, discussion of technology, how to finance it, right? All this very important because this journey, is very critical. Why? Because every sectors will have different challenges.
Yeah.
And for large, medium, and small corporations, they also have different challenges. For the small corporation, this is very difficult.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we share, right, all this. And Campus Center of Excellence is also important. Why? ASEAN is the lungs of the world, they call it, right? Where a lot of forests here in this ASEAN. Indonesia have large area. Vietnam, Malaysia, Myanmar, all these areas, right? So we should be part of the conversation globally. we should be part of saying, how do we value our forests? How do we value what we are doing? How do we make sure we're part of the discussion that the standardization internationally, we are part of it? Because we cannot just wait and see, no.
Yeah.
We have to be more active. So that's
Yeah.
why we have the Campus Center of Excellence. And then on food security, right? On food security, we say we need to make sure that, we have enough food, we have enough security for our ASEAN countries, right?
Yep.
So we can help each other in that way, right?
Yep.
But in doing so, we say, let's not forget our farmers to make sure that they are inclusively participating in this journey also. And so we introduce what we call inclusive closed-loop model for agriculture, whereby large corporation help the small one, mentoring for market and the money itself, right?
Building the capacity until
Yeah.
to the lowest level.
Yeah, we have to do that so that we can actually build, right? Help doing but we have to make sure our farmers are participating in this too.
Yep.
We cannot leave them behind too, right?
Inclusivity.
And inclusivity. And then on health, what we are doing, we call it the one-shot campaign. It's a one-shot campaign. It's a lot of campaign within one, but is actually, when you remember, right, the pandemic is just over. Everyone seems to forget about it, but we have to be anticipating for if there is another pandemic, right? Example, vaccines. ASEAN did not have produced
vaccine
vaccine.
hub,
Yeah.
We have to make sure we have that. Medicines, even the substance of medicine, the core, the raw materials of medicine is still import. So we have to make sure that we are producing it in ASEAN, right? And then, of course, all this vaccine, not only for COVID-19, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But malaria, for dengue fever, for all the so-called communicable diseases in ASEAN, right? And more than that is, if there is a type of pandemic, how can we help each other? Last time was very difficult because of regulatory situation, right? So we have to make sure of that. And in regards to trade and investment facilitation, is all about how do we create what we say ASEAN business entity. Because in order for us to push more investment intra-ASEAN, we have to make sure to make it easier for ASEAN companies within ASEAN to invest. Okay? And so those are the 8 legacies that,
Well,
we've introduced, right?
We will be right back. We'll continue with more questions.
Yes, because we already have a lot of questions after hearing your explanation.
We still have a lot to do. But you know what, Pak Arsjad, what I love is the fact that Indonesia seems to be the perfect chair for this year, because it seems like we are the case study that's already proven. We've learned so much on our own that are very relevant to be shared to our ASEAN member countries as well. And we can't wait to hear more about that, because we will continue right after the break. Yes.
Yes, and of course we will have more to talk about the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry coming up after the break. So please stay here only on the 3-Hour News Show, only on See Today.